Welcome back. Areas around Singapore's first regenerative microforest have been found to be up to 5 degrees Celsius cooler, with early signs that biodiversity is thriving as well. City Developments Limited is marking 1 year of the project near City Square Mall. Experts are studying the project as a nature-based solution to combat urban heat. And for more, we're joined by Professor Veera Sekaran from the National University of Singapore, who works on the urban sustainability and regenerative solutions, and Esther An, who is a Chief Sustainability Officer at City Developments Limited. Welcome both to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having it.
Well, let's start with the Professor.
Yes.
Right?
Hi.
Let's talk about the research first behind this project. The finding here is that microforest is making its surroundings up to 5 degrees cooler. Now, that's quite significant.
Yes.
How did you go around gathering the data for that to show that it was 5 degrees?
So when we started putting the microforest together, we put in sensors before and after. So we had sensors outside and sensors inside. As we developed the forestscapes, we also started taking in data and detecting all the different temperature, heat signals, plus also light and other parameters that we were able to gather data from. We did also handheld sensors that went around to validate some of this information that was coming through. And it was quite interesting to realize that actually over a period of time, it's beginning to validate the impact that this green space has on the microclimate. And the microclimate is not just within the forest itself, but also on the attendant areas around it, which is quite significant to understand how that benefit actually then becomes a lot more co-benefits that we get out of this microforest.
Yeah, let's talk about that microclimate then, right? The nearby areas as well are also affected. So what kind of changes did you observe in the surrounding areas, not just in the microforest?
So there are many things that happen, because when you have got a densification of vegetation of forest types within that space, there is also wind flow that actually begins to go through that particular vegetation types. And because of the structure of the microforest that you have within the different layers that you have, there is a lot of different wind flow patterns that will actually happen within that space. And it actually picks up speed, and you will have that cooling effect around the surrounding areas as well.
It's quite amazing that just a forest could really bring down the heat by such a significant amount. Well, let's turn to Esther now. What made CDL say yes to this project to begin with? That was a year ago. What did that consideration involve from a business perspective?
Well, the idea was actually mooted, in end 2024. When we were actually overseas with Associate Professor Adrian Lu on the site of COP at Baku. So we were talking about why it is really hot in Singapore. How can we actually find solutions to reduce urban heat? And of course, Singapore is approximately, warming twice, as the global average, and we are next to the equator. So temperatures, will be really going up. And urban heat island effect is very, very real, because we are 100% urbanized. And in fact, urban heat island effect can add 7 degrees.
Yeah, the buildings are absorbing heat, right?
So that's why we have to look at, you can't solve the climate crisis without looking at nature. And we also have to look at nature for solutions rather than just extract resources from nature. So that's why nature-based solutions is something that actually globally is also looking at it. How can we tap onto nature to solve problem rather than, make it worse? Yeah. So microforest is a really very, very, interesting idea that actually globally it also have some case study to show that it is actually growing faster and denser than the normal way of forest, planting and all. So when we came back immediately, January, we started work, and then there was time pressure for us to do so because we need to unveil it in March. So within 2 months, we built a forest. And then it was 10th March that it was unveiled. And then 1 year on, we want to adopt a more scientific approach, get data. Common sense tell you that when the weather is hot, when the sun is strong, you stand under the shade. But without data, it's very hard to convince people. And we were very, very excited that after 1 year, the data are so encouraging. And it just proves that there's also very strong business case because the investment into a microforest is no more than actually normal convention
I'm curious
landscape.
to hear, Professor, as well, given the success of the results that you found, right? What kind of plants and trees, if you can kind of help us picture the microforest, what kind of plants and trees were used there? What species were you typically picking out?
Typically, we would use a lot of the native species, and we would be very careful with species selection. We actually had to make sure the tiering happens quite similar to how you would find within the natural forest spaces that you would have. So we approached it with a typical forestscapes kinds of a design methodology that allows us to use for example, Syndericum cagyptii, Cyanometra ramifolia, and Flocartia broccum.
What
a number
kind
of different
impact
species.
did those species
So these
have?
species, some of them actually would many of them bring in other species as well, because especially fauna attracting plants. So we had a mix of different species with some of the canopy trees. And at the same time, we had some shrubs and also ground cover as well. And we chose them also for the fact that they bring in a lot of other fauna, which attracts birds, butterflies, and other faunal species as well.
Yeah, why was that biodiversity quite interesting for you and a sign that it is going well?
You know, this is an urbanized area, and urbanized areas are without flora, you wouldn't find fauna. That's obvious, right? So I think this became a very important part of trying to include a lot more floral species that allows fauna to come through. But I think apart from that, we also are very clear that patches of forestscapes like this, microforest, would also have natural recruitment of other flora species. And they would come either by pollinators or some other means. They would actually then find spaces within that, and they will actually germinate. And you would have many of these new species beginning to thrive within that space as well. And so it's not only fauna biodiversity, also floral biodiversity.
Right, and given the results you've seen so far, Esther, do you think that you would see more of such projects across Singapore? Is CDL planning to also double on this microforest?
Well, that is exactly our wish, because I think Singapore is already very fortunate. We have 40% green cover. But with temperatures keep rising, we can have more. And definitely, CDL have planned for at least 2 to 3 more in the next 12 months. So we hope that actually today we have a very big event, and a lot of fellow developers and building owners were there also. So we hope that the results speak for itself. And we hope that it can scale up and help Singapore to cool our urban spaces by greening.
Yeah, we're all looking forward to a more green and cooler Singapore as well. Thank you both so much for coming in today and sharing about the microforest here in Singapore. I've been chatting with Prof. Veera Sekaran from the Office of the President at NUS, and also Esther An from City Developments.